Calgary Pride proudly serves Treaty 7 on the traditional territory of the Niitsitapi Confederacy, Ayahe Nakoda, and Esutina. This land is also home to a Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. This place, where the Elbow River meets the Bow, is known by many names to many people, including Mohkinstsis, Winchespa, Kurtsisaw, Otwaskune, and Calgary. We thank the Indigenous communities of Turtle Island for both the historic and ongoing stewardship and protection of the land we collectively inhabit today. Many nations and people, Indigenous and non, are fortunate to call Mohkinstsis and Treaty 7 territory our home. Acknowledging this land is Indigenous protocol, which we honor as a step towards reconciliation and fulfilling our responsibilities as treaty people. Working alongside all nations, Indigenous and non, we strive to create safe spaces where everyone can live openly and authentically.
Hi, my name is Sumit, and I work for Calgary Pride as Manager of Production and Programming. And today with me is Michael. She, her are your pronouns. And I feel like you might get misgendered a lot. Do you want to add to that a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for bringing that up, because I feel like just as a community and as a society, we really need to be talking a bit more about pronouns. I'm trans, I'm a woman, and I have a beard currently, and I'm looking forward to that going away at some point. But, right now, not very passing. And right now, we don't really have a habit of asking people's pronouns. So I'm figuring out ways to do that. But I just think it's really important for us to be able to validate, who that person is inside the other person. And for cisgendered people who identify with the assigned gender that they were given at birth, it's not a big deal, and that's good. I'm really glad for them. And at the other side of that is for folks who aren't cisgendered, it's really hard to get misgendered all the time. It's kind of like if you're a sailboat on the ocean and things are going really good. You got a good wind, I'm not an expert at sailing, but it's kind of like the wind gets taken out of your sails. When somebody says he, him, to me, or even sometimes the way they say dude, it takes away from how you feel. You feel really unseen and even invisible in a way. And so I just kind of wanted to mention that, yes, my pronouns are she, her, even though people may recognize my voice as manly. But I would really like to see more of us making space just to ask, like, hi, my name's Michael. I use she, her pronouns. What pronouns do you use and what's your name?
Yeah.
We can make it normal. And so thanks for bringing that up. And I just wanted to mention that.
No, thank you. Thank you for, highlighting your part of like how you feel every time you're misgendered. So thanks for that. You MC, you are a DJ. You are also a host of Sweetie Treaty Show. At the same time, you do work, hip-hop youth work. And your credentials as in educational systems, educational structures as a society. You're a graduate from Mount Royal University with a health sciences degree, which is very impressive.
Oh, thank you.
I want to share my first memory of you. Last year, in around August, I see you wearing a green knee-length skirt and the Pride flag raising ceremony.
Yeah, this was to kick off Pride Week, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. And then we did a prayer ceremony prior to that. And you were very engrossed in, setting up everything, helping Warren, who's our knowledge keeper.
Shout out Warren, Winnipeg, and
not from Winnipeg.
Teleni Rose, Heavyhead.
Yeah, and Warren is not from Winnipeg.
Yeah, Warren is not from Winnipeg. Currently residing in Treaty 6 and from Sixiga.
Yeah. And you were just all making sure everything is set, and you went back, and then you were like, okay, now I can decompress. And then as the ceremony started, I could see your like, worries lift off, and you were like in the moment, fanning the
Did I really
sage.
look stressed?
You did. Well, it felt like you wanted to make sure that everything is to the T perfect before you just relax and take that moment. You're like, I'm here now.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's a Cree word, even though like those two elders we just mentioned, they're both Blackfoot, hey? But, the word that we colloquially use is escapios, which is a Cree word, means helper. And usually the context of that word is a spiritual helper. So you're helping an elder, in a ceremony. And I don't know, there's just something that feels right about that, doing that to me. I often fall into that role either casually just in my life, but more formally in spiritual settings or ceremonial settings. I guess, reflecting back on that moment, it's my job. I feel like a responsibility when I'm doing that to help in a good way and to be attentive to details. So, maybe as I continue to practice, in that way that I'll become a little bit less stressed,
Mm-hmm.
But, that's kind of the beginning, running around, making sure I'm supporting and helping folks. And then oftentimes when the ceremony starts, I'm moving around a lot less.
Yeah.
And in a way, in the Western world, we say holding space. That's part of my responsibility there too. So I think when I can be still, I'm kind of able to, I guess, be more relaxed and try and put that energy out rather than attending to tasks or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a very distinct memory, and oftentimes I don't remember, details of everything unless I'm really, looking. So.
Struck you somehow.
It did, yes, absolutely. I want to start this interview by asking you about your identity as Two-Spirit. Please shed some light on, your identity and your journey thus far as a Two-Spirit person.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't always out of the closet, I guess, is a good place to start. And, living just about, over 30 years, thinking that I'm a man and a male, really kind of ingrained certain habits in me, and so it's been a process of coming to understanding. And I remember, we kind of use the word Two-Spirit colloquially, and there's a lot of interesting things that happens around that word. One thing to know about that word is that came about in 1990. There was a gay, lesbian, Indigenous, we wouldn't have said Indigenous, we would have said Native then, community gathering in Winnipeg. It was 1990. And there's an Anishinaabe person who had a dream and who brought that word as a translation from Anishinaabe or Ojibwa, which is the language. And so that word, and this happens a lot when we're kind of in a Western colonial society where, some people describe it as a melting pot where we didn't share words like that really before contact. There would have been a cultural exchange, of course, but when the whole world, was conquered by Europe and most of us are speaking English now, we end up kind of using English words in place of our own words. And so it kind of stressed me out for a while because Two-Spirit is actually an umbrella word. It can mean somebody who is Indigenous, who may be gay, can use Two-Spirit. Somebody who's Indigenous, who is trans like myself, or even non-binary, can use the word Two-Spirit. And I think James McCocus said it the best. The winner, one of the winners, the Two-Spirit couple there, James McCocus and Anthony Johnson, who won
The Amazing Race.
Yeah, Amazing Race Canada.
Right.
Shout out those two.
Yeah.
James, in a presentation that I seen on Indigenous Peoples Day, this past one here, James said that Two-Spirit is a placeholder word until we remember the words in our own languages for, our gender expression or sexuality. And I thought that was really helpful because when we're all speaking English, it's like we're trying to practice our culture, but the culture is really embedded in the language. And so in a way, it's kind of like the round peg and square hole kind of situation. There's always going to be compromises around that. But in our languages, there's these deep meanings that you just can't express in English. And so, it was really helpful to understand Two-Spirit as a placeholder word, for Indigenous people like myself who speak English, who speak very little of our languages. In fact, I'm adopted out here in Treaty 7 as a Blackfoot person, but I don't actually have any biological ancestry as a Blackfoot person. So for me, trying to make sense of things, it's like that sound. When I say that, that's kind of my own form of displacement and trying to reconnect to Native culture and also learn the words of my relatives in Blackfoot, but eventually Nehio, which is Cree, and Michif, which is Métis.
That's interesting. I want to ask that what have you learned about your gender and sexuality in your journey? You kind of started with, you realize at the age 30 you mentioned, right? So I just want to just step it back a little, and I want to know your journey. Yeah.
Well, I think, one thing is we always lump gender and sexuality together. I think as a colonial society, we're really good at putting things together that we just don't understand. If we kind of like marginalize things that are not a part of the hegemony or the dominant society. And so, when it comes to gender for me, it really was about who am I truly. And I guess one of the stories that comes to mind is that when I was really little, I can remember my mom talking to me and making this interesting observation that I was really kind of caretaking in the way that a mother or we would expect a woman to be. And I don't remember the exact words that were said or the place, but I can remember from the response, a reaction of my parents and my family that something, was wrong. And we might say today, I don't think we had this language in my family for this then, but it triggered their transphobia that I'm breaking a gender role right now by kind of doing this. And I could feel that. And I remember feeling really ashamed, for that. And really even, hating myself for feeling that way. One of the things that I do is hip hop youth work. We do ciphers, where I MC. I also DJ for our ciphers. So learning those elements in hip hop, there's 4 elements. Hip hop, breaking, MCing, and writing, which is graffiti. So as a hip hopper, culturally, you want to know all 4. It doesn't mean you have to have mastery over them, but understanding those cultural elements is really important. So getting a chance to do that with the youth, it's really interesting for me because I don't feel that same shame that I felt when I was younger. And I didn't even put this together, but my friend Dwight Farrahat, shout out Dwight, he said this to me a number of times. He said, he calls me bro. I actually really like the word bro when people call me bro, unless they're like bro, like really bro.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, the energy we put on words. But he said to me, you're a really good youth worker. I don't have to coach you. I don't have to intervene. Lots of times ahead of time what I'm thinking or what I need before I even ask you for it. I had a conversation with my mom recently, my biological mom, who I was trying to explain kind of my trans identity, which she's coming to terms with or trying to understand. And I told her that story of being feeling a lot of shame when I was growing up and really not liking myself for being that way. And it kind of felt like when Dwight was saying those things to me, like it was the opposite in a way, like where I was able to feel kind of confident or feel good about myself for that quality. It's this, to me, in understanding myself, it's the same thing. So it's really nice to get to practice that and just to feel good about who I am. And I think, in a way, it's a part of transitioning for me because that is a part of myself and a part of myself that I felt ashamed of that I don't, or at least I'm learning how to not feel ashamed for. And those youth deserve it, so shout out the homies, little homies.
Shout out to homies indeed. Something you mentioned as part of society, it's society's role to learn about gender and sexuality, and it's not one person's responsibility. Would you mind adding a little bit more to that?
Well, I guess something I do want to add is that, first of all, I got to shout out my friend Rebecca Dawn for being really gender affirming in my life, and all the other friends of mine that have been really gender affirming. You know, those are people who were able to socially transition with me and treat me like a woman, think about me like a girl, and help me to start getting into that space. Because, like, as much as we can say this is who we are, there's also functioning in society as somebody, and that's, the social part of it. So I just wanted to mention, too, the importance of gender affirming people in your life when you're transitioning. And the other side of that, too, is that while those people can be really helpful, at the same time, it's like training wheels. I really appreciate those people because I needed them so that I could get from where I was to where I'm at now. Because at some point, I just need to affirm myself and really know that in my heart, even though I do already, knowing that more confidently in social spaces. And so I appreciate the role that gender affirming people have played in my life so that I could get to where I'm at. And now, I feel like, not to say I don't appreciate it, people who are gender affirming, but at some point it just normalizes. It shouldn't be those people are going out of their way to help me with this. It's just actually who I am. And at the same time, for me, I'm not going out of my way to avoid people who aren't gender affirming. I just know who I am at the same point. So I think that's an important thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is, a lot of us, especially in the Indigenous community, we become really disconnected with our sexualities, or, we've kind of adopted colonial ways of sexuality. And I have been really trying to heal through this and try and figure out, what this means to me. And one of the things that I came up with was that sexuality is love, is true love. It's a form of love. And that in our society, we divorce love from sexuality. And what I mean by that is that we think sex is one thing and intimacy is another, like closeness with somebody. And I think this is really problematic because then we have one set of rules for sex and one set of rules for intimacy. And, that means people are growing up, even before they know what sex is, thinking that when I have a crush on somebody, before I even know what sex is, because little kids can have crushes on each other, we get into puberty where all suddenly now we're thinking like, okay, like, we're scared that our kids are going to have sex, or our young people are going to have sex, and without teaching them that it's an expression of love. And that by doing that, I really think we make room for violence around sex. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that we live in a rape culture. We slut shaming is a big part of that. We really feel like any sexuality, any form of I guess I want to go back to James McCocus and Anthony Johnson. When Anthony Johnson was giving his presentation, he said to me, this is where this idea came from, is that sexuality is about how you love and who you love. And that really blew me away. I've heard it before, said like that, but I was really in that mindset that sex and sexuality and intimacy, there's these separate things, but it is really about love. And that we don't give our young people, and that even means our inner child and us adults, an opportunity to know that our sexuality is really about how we love and who we love. And I think we should, as a society, take some time to think about that, or to feel that and what that means for us.
Absolutely. I normally say feeding someone is my love language.
Yeah.
What would you say is your love language?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Shout out to 5 Love Languages, by the way. That's a great book. It's really helped me, and I should revisit it. But one of the things that I read in there is that our love languages can change over time. So I think for the longest time I said words of affirmation are my love language. But it reminds me, I'm a girl, and I think the way that I love and want to be loved generally, and not saying this is like a hard rule because I'm kind of interested in all humans, relatively speaking, but that, for the most part, I'm a girl who wants to be a girl. Gee, I'm just getting my words mixed up. I am a girl who wants to be with a girl. And I can remember there was a friend of mine who had a crush on in high school. And I remember asking her, we're friends and hanging out and da-da-da-da-da. I remember asking her to braid my hair. And I think she was, again, kind of learning what it was. I felt like I did something wrong because she shied away or something, And then I had an experience recently where a friend of mine, she held my hand, and I was expressing feminine. I wasn't stealth or hiding my transness as a woman. And my whole body lit up. My whole body was responding. And, it reminds me that, what I was saying, sexuality is love. And that, to me, there's a combination there of, one, I was authentically in my gender of who I am. And two, there was a form of a human being that really my body, my mind, my heart, and I would even say my spirit were responding to. And as a male or as a man playing that role, I never really felt that. It felt much more mechanical and much more forced, I guess.
Interesting.
And so my love language, the point, this long-winded story, is that I feel like words of affirmation will always be high on that list, but physical touch, especially by somebody who I feel like a desire for love from, it's just doing something that I am only just learning what that feels like now as being able to be authentically who I am.
Brilliant. That's beautiful. And thank you for also sharing a little bit of your personal anecdote about that too. This is a constant question it's in my mind, and I really wanted to ask you is, I am, first generation immigrant. When I say first generation, I'm the first one who came outside of the country to make a living or live in a different country. So my journey for learning about indigeneity and the history of Indigenous folks in this country, and now learning about the unmarked graves, the knowledge started from understanding the history, now immersing myself and ensuring, whatever is happening in and around, we are informed about that. But a lot of people, Canada, on regular basis, there's immigrants and people coming from all parts of the world. What do you think is their role, or a recommendation might seem very, we're imposing that. What do you think, what role they should take to catch themselves up with with Indigenous folks who have lived in this from, in this land for years and years? The question I want to revert back to is, where does their journey of learning and understanding Indigenous folks start? Or what does that look like? Or is there... It's a huge question. It's a very meta question.
Yeah, that's very meta. Thanks for asking the question, because I do feel like this really needs to get talked about. Before I respond, I just want to say I'm sending love and prayers out to everybody who's been affected by, I'm pretty sure, over 10,000 children now. This is not a surprise to anybody who, is aware of this colonial history. And it's a good wake-up call for Canada. So if you're feeling affected by this, I'm sending you love and prayers, and I'm also asking you to respond in a good way to this truth instead of burying it or ignoring it. Going back to Two-Spirit and even the LGBTQIA plus community, I don't really feel Two-Spirits always feel a part, or Indigiqueer folks feel a part of the LGBT community. The contemporary narrative in the LGBT community is that things are getting better. Even folks who are just allies to that community will say, things are getting better. I hear that a lot. And I actually just want to shake those folks when I say that, or when they say that, because it really is also another form of erasure. Because for Indigenous people, we already had this acceptance. We if there was transphobia in our history, and homophobia or just phobia of people who are not straight and cisgendered, it was long ago. We got over this sort of thing. So for Indigenous people, Indigiqueer and Two-Spirits, we it's different for us. We're reclaiming something we already had. It's not something that's getting better and this is a progress of our society. This is a progress of the society that committed genocide and displaced us, and then who was left over tried to assimilate us to this society. That's the narrative that we're being told. This is what we follow. And so I really feel strongly that folks, newcomers to this land who've made their home here or making their home here, need to understand that even if their skin is darker, they're still settlers on this land. And just like we get upset when fair-skinned folks ignore that power that they possess, and I'm not saying darker-skinned folks aren't being displaced. European colonialism and, there's other forces there, but primarily what we're dealing with in the world right now is the results of European colonialism and the wakes of that and trying to stay balanced. So not to take away from any of those histories of where people are coming from, but you have to understand that your home here is only made possible because of, like what I said, the displacement, genocide, and assimilation of Indigenous peoples. After 500 years of fighting against it in complicated relationships, where we saved the settlers when they first came here, the European settlers. They wouldn't have survived without us. And yet here we are subject to their dominating systems. And so for folks who are trying to figure out their place, one of the first things I feel is identifying that power dynamic exists whether you like it or not. And that in Indigenous cultures, we're relationship-based. And so, which is oftentimes very similar to where newcomers' cultures, or the way that newcomers' cultures are. But instead of valuing their culture, the way that this dominant system works is they want you to assimilate. So it's really important, I think, to understand that, yes, you come from a culture, and it is important, to be able to fit in Canada. We all need to be able to participate in these systems so we can provide for ourselves, but also just recognize that relationships with Indigenous peoples are really important. Like in Treaty 7, we're all treaty people here, and if we don't recognize that means something, that you have a home here because that treaty was signed, you're choosing to be ignorant to all those people who were displaced, killed, and assimilated, and who are trying to, still here today, trying to make their way.
Yeah. I think I feel the same way just because of the stereotypes you may hear from your fellow immigrant friends, and those are being penetrated through the systems, which has been telling that, this is what Indigenous folks are. But that's so untrue. That's like, the hegemonic narrative that exists needs to be erased, right?
Yeah, that Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
It really told us who the Indians are.
I want to know any last thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, so I guess want to say that trans people have a hard time staying here on this place because we're constantly reminded that we don't have a place here. I never thought anything about bathrooms before I came out of the closet. Now I have like anxiety attacks every time I go to the bathroom. So, just as an example, so I struggled, to keep myself here regularly. And what I wanted to kind of end with is, I asked an elder about this. I said I needed help with this. And what the elder said is that you need to remember life is a gift. And just like as a person giving you a gift, you can be a good gift receiver. But not just from another human, but if creation is giving you the gift of life, what does that mean? How do we honor that? How do we be a good gift receiver in that sense?
Receiving the gift of life. Indeed. That's what I said yesterday too.
Yes, you did.
Well, I want to thank you, Michael, for coming here and shedding light on your identity as an individual, your work, and your learnings as we grow together. The organization Calgary Pride grows in their journey of reconciliation. Stolen word from Nanchi. Thank you for that.
He probably got it from a Native person.
Probably. But that's okay. Action prompts, this is what we are doing rather than just like, a word. So I just want to thank you that being open and wanting to interview and opening yourself up while you're in, in the transition.
I'm in transition.
But I'm digging the look. I'm loving the look, and I can't wait to attend one of your DJ performances very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.